Hi, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. Happy Tuesday. My name is Anna, and I'm part of the board members of Latinas in Tech in the London chapter. For those in the US, I hope you're having a good day. And for those in Europe, I hope your day was great. Welcome to our second event of Latinas in Tech London chapter. Before we get started, and for those who are new, I would like to make a quick intro to Latinas in Tech. And then I will cover some housekeeping items before introducing you to our moderator, who will kick off the panel. So our mission is to create a tech industry where Latinas are well represented through all levels of the ecosystem by empowering us to be innovators and leaders. We do this by partnering with top tech companies to provide a safe space for learning, mentorship, and recruitment. Latinas in Tech was founded in 2014 in Silicon Valley, and what started as a group of 4 friends is now a group of over 10,000 women and some men across the US, Mexico, and now Europe. If you haven't registered as a member, please visit the Latinas in Tech website to register and create an account so you can get access to events, recruiters, and more. Feel free to join the chapter that is closer to you. And for those in Europe, if you want to be part of the Latina in Tech London chapter, or if you want to be our next speaker, please reach out to one of us. So before we start, just a quick housekeeping items. Feel free to interact with anyone in the community. You have the chat room. And then if you want to ask any questions to the panelists, please use the Q&A session. You can also vote for any question, and we'll be monitoring those as we go. Now, let me introduce you to our moderator, Gigi Etienne. Gigi is French Colombian and has been living in the UK for 10 years. She's been a fashion tech entrepreneur and went through the pre-accelerator tech startup program. For the last 2 years, Gigi has been working at What Rewards, and she recently completed a full stack web development course and is passionate about the power of code to empower women. Gigi, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. So excited to have everyone here. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today. We have a super exciting panel today, really 2 very inspiring women Latino developers that I'm very excited to have a conversation with. And so make sure that you prep your questions. Like Anna said, there's the Q&A section. So when you have questions, we'll have some time at the end for questions. So make sure that you are thinking about your questions as well. Cool. So I'm gonna start by introducing our 2 speakers. So Leticia, you started your career as an oceanographer. So you did your bachelor's and master's degree in something that's not related to software engineering, but then you kind of taught yourself, actually, and you're going to tell us all about this in a second, but you taught yourself how to code, and then you ended up you are now a software engineer at Stripe. So pretty amazing story. You're also one of the hosts and founders of an amazing podcast that interviews Brazilian researchers and talks about technical concepts. And then like similar to that, you also have a blog where you take technical concepts and then sort of break them down in an easy way to understand. So really fascinating, really excited to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. And our second speaker is Luisa. Luisa, you after finished high school, you loved so many different things. You loved history, biology, geography, foreign languages, everything. But you somehow said, right, like what connects all the dots is software engineering. I want to hear more about that in a second. And after you finished you went to Germany and you did your bachelor's degree in Germany in the Free University of Berlin, and then did an internship as an iOS developer for Kayak, where you've been working for the last 3 years as a developer. So really happy to have you here today. Welcome as well.
Thank you.
Cool. So for everyone. So we're gonna touch on a few different topics. First of all, I want to hear from both Leticia and Luisa about their stories, how they came to be who they are today, and their career and professional progression. Really interesting stories, as you can already imagine and see from the bios. We're also then going to talk a little bit about their experiences as being Latino women in tech and in code in particular. So really excited for that question as well. We're going to touch on the importance of code today. So what's the place of code and software development in the world today? So really interesting topic. And finally, we're also going to talk about what it takes to be a developer, and really interesting insights for that section as well. So let's start with Luisa, with your story. So you studied software engineering. Tell me why you chose that career path, and why did you decide to go to Germany?
Well, when I was in high school and throughout secondary, I liked a lot of different things. I was never very good or especially good at something, but I found a lot of different things very interesting, from biology to history to water. And I was always like, every time someone would ask, like, what are you going to study? I was like, I don't know. And then eventually I was in a computer history museum. And then I realized that there were 2,000 different topics being addressed. And I was like, I think that if I go into engineering, then I can, or into programming, I can keep in touch with everything I like long term. So that was sort of the decision. I had no idea what I was getting into. And then Germany was because it was 2012 and I was going to study in Spain. But there was something called economic crisis. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one. And it was not really possible to study there. I was in the US and I had saved some money, but then I traveled for about 4 months and spent more money than I should have spent. So I had like 800 euros to my name, and I was like, Germany has actually a very affordable studying system. I'm going to try it for a year. If I manage to learn German and get accepted to the university, I'll study. If not, then I don't know. So that's why.
And what sort of challenges came with going to Germany specifically? Like, did you know the language, or what sort of extra challenges came with that?
I did not know the language. I came. I arrived actually October about 8-9 years ago. And I started reading Harry Potter in German with the Kindle, which allows you to translate word by word.
Yeah.
The first 50 pages took a month with about 8 hours per day. I was working like twice a week as a nanny to pay rent, period, and food. And then it was challenging. Like I didn't have much of social life for a year or anything else. It was just every single time, because I didn't have money to learn, German or language school. So it was just at home. Yeah.
That's great. So you were doing like full-time studying, learning German, and then full-time studying.
That's it. For a year, learn German, and then it looks like if you learn a language at least 10 hours a day, you learn it. So it happened.
Yeah.
And I made it. And the good thing is that in Germany, or at least here in Berlin, to study computer sciences, you don't need to have a special note in your SATs, in your high school diploma. So I just got accepted. And then it started.
That's pretty amazing. I want to go back to one point you said earlier. What was it about programming that encompassed that? You said, programming was the answer for me because it encompassed all of these topics that I was passionate about. What is it about programming that encompasses all of these topics together?
Well, pretty much everything that you want to do can have a side for programming. If you if you want to learn more about, I don't know, jellyfish, then what Leticia knows way more than we do, then you maybe want to create a website, or maybe you want to create an app that allows you to take a picture of it and classify it. Or maybe you love recipes, you love cooking. So maybe you want a small system that allows you to have 3 different recipes, and then it matches the recipes that you can cook. Or you love colors and art. So like I know someone who just learned programming, so he could take paintings and make that some part of it moved. So anything where you go from, right now I work in travel industry. So like, yeah, you need it, like anything you can think of, there is something that you can do with programming to either make it bigger or make it more reachable or more accessible. And that's a beautiful thing, because you're never in one category. And you're always learning about all sorts of different,
That's a great explanation. That's great. Thank you. Very helpful. One last question for you, Luisa, before we move on to Leticia's story. What was the male and female ratio in your class when you were in your undergraduate degree, and how was that experience for you? How did you feel that?
It was about 90% men, 10% women. Mm-hmm. One huge advantage is there's never a queue for the bathroom. So that's pretty good. And other than that, I don't know if any of the great experience I had studying or with the people I had was because of the ratio, but I was never treated differently. And I was just together with a bunch of people that were very like, oh my God, what are we doing? So they were just ready to help. So I do not have enough knowledge to know if that was conditioned by that ratio. But at least I don't have any negative experience, and I hope that's a general thing.
Yeah, so. You're really interesting. Thank you, Luisa. Of
course.
Leticia, you had a completely different path. So you started, you're going to tell us all about it now. You started as an oceanographer and in Brazil. And then I think I was drawing some parallels with what Luisa was saying, but you started out as well with like thinking about problems and how you could use code to solve them. So how did you get into, how did you do that transition? How did you get into code? What interested you about it?
Well, I didn't pursue coding. Coding found me. So a lot of people think on oceanography as like this biological science, and I'm gonna be at the beach with dolphins. And the reality is a lot of data science, a lot of data analysis, more specifically. So on my second year in college, I joined a laboratory and I started doing research. And I learned to code in a software called MATLAB, which is basically this like interface where you can work with matrix and vectors for data analysis. And I found that like pretty interesting and kind of easy in terms of like, it didn't take me a lot of time to figure things out. So I started studying that. I decided to go to this more physical oceanography area where you have more calculus, physics, mathematics by itself. And then I started like, I decided an internship. And during this internship, I met a couple of guys that were programmers and were oceanographers. And they were like, hey, MATLAB is a paid software, so it's very expensive. You can only do one thing, which is data analysis. Like, why don't you learn Python? Python is more like broad, you can do a lot of things. And so I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I'm gonna try, I like this. And I started studying by myself. There's a lot of free content. Well, it had less at that time. This was like 2012. And then I started learning. And like every problem that I could put my hands on and try to figure it out, I did. Eventually, I went to a Python meetup in the city I was living. And well, as this similar experience to Luisa, I was the only woman there. And it was very scary because I was not a programmer. I didn't know what I was doing there. So I left and I said, I'm never going to come back. I don't understand what these talks are about. I don't understand what they're saying. Eventually the guys figure out, all right, like the only woman didn't come back, and they called someone that was a specific of the data analysis and like, hey, next meetup, like there's going to be a talk, you're going to like it's in your area, please come, like we miss you, kind of like that. And I went there and it was amazing. Like a bunch of guys, again, I was still the only woman at the time, but like I saw this bunch of guys really worried about me and worried that I would be there comfortable and learning. And like, so I got involved with like Pilates and teaching coding to other women. And in the meantime, I was doing my master's. And so I was doing all the pre and post processing in Python. So it was like getting more experience. One day I decided to present my like a 5-minute talk about what I was doing, and a project manager actually saw it and was like, "Whoa, you really can program! Like, do you want to join us?" I was like, "I have no idea what you do," and she was like, "Oh no, but what you do is as complex as we do. Like, you just have to do it in a different area." I was like, "Okay, I guess," and so I kind of like stumbled on the things. I got passion, and I never figured out that I could do it as a profession. I never saw it as an option. So by the time I got this opportunity, I had a salary reduction. My life was pretty much worse than I had before, but it gave me, as Luisa said, like an a broad way of opportunities. I feel like I have a superpower, you know, like I have worked in the food industry and in the legal area industry, and now I'm on payments industry. So basically I learned the superpower, and now I can work wherever I want, because like it's kind of like a superpower. So yeah, that's a very short brief story.
Definitely a superpower. Amazing. I wanted to ask you, so not only did you not study like a bachelor's in software engineering, but you also actually taught yourself, like you like read on your own and like found all the information. Like what challenges came with that, and what, yeah, so how, because I can't imagine, like I did a boot camp, but I still had teachers, you know, telling me, you know, yeah. Like, so what challenges came with that? Like that must have been pretty like challenging experience for sure.
It still is, to be honest, like because the problem is not the amount of things that you don't know, is the things that you don't know you don't know. And these were the things that broke me a couple of times. So for example, like when you're doing a graduation, you see a bunch of things that not necessarily you like or remember, but you have an idea, right? Like you know that area exists, even if you don't like it, even if you don't really like put all your thought in it. So maybe it's something, you know, it exists, but you don't really know how it works. The problem when you are coming and studying by yourself is like figuring out the things that you should learn. So for instance, one thing that is extremely important is testing, like learn how to test a code. I had no idea that tests existed, like absolutely no idea, like how the web works, you know, like, so these were the things that make life very difficult, because it's not something that you can go home and like, yeah, I'm going to take a book and I'm going to read it, because you don't know they're there, you know. So, and usually when you face them, you're already needing to know that, right? Like, so you either have to be in an environment that allows you to say, look, I don't know this really basic stuff. Can you please give me an overview? And later on, I'm going to go home and study it. I think that was the most, and it's still today, like there are things that I face daily that I have to ask my team, and suddenly I realize, oh, this is something that is theoretically basic, because like people know this exists, but I had no idea they were there.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about it never stops. Like you're continuously learning, and there's always stuff that you're not going to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very good point. Last question for you, Leticia, on your story. Like, you recently moved from Brazil to Dublin. How was that for you? How was it, the whole experience of moving to a different continent, different country, finding a new job? Like, how was that for you?
Okay, so that was very hard. So in Brazil, I had my podcast. I had this different story that I talked up a lot in Python community. So I had a lot of people that know me and know that I'm hardworking, and even if I don't know something, I'll, you know, like, even if you take my resume and you look there, like, I have a bachelor and a master's in oceanography, like, automatic software will throw it away, right? I don't have a bachelor degree. I don't have a like cool university from MIT or something, you know. So the first thing was that, like, I got here to the city where I have absolutely no one that knows me, and a lot of automatic software will simply discard my resume, right? Like, so this was problem number one. So I started going to every meetup that I could get my hands on, and talking to people and things like that. So I eventually met someone and I applied to a couple companies and I got offers. But that was definitely my number one problem, because I applied to a lot of the big ones and my resume was just like thrown away. So this was problem number one. The problem number two was language a little bit. And that was more complicated when I joined a company than previously. Because, okay, even if you speak really good English, even if you like see all your movies in English and everything, when you join a company and you have to spend 10 hours a day speaking English and thinking in English and trying to put your thoughts in another language, like, that was exhausting. And so I got here in December. I started in Stripe in May. Until like the end of last year, I couldn't do anything after work because my brain was completely drowned. And so, like, this was, oh my God, so exhausting. So those were the two main difficulties that I had, as like getting a job on a foreign country and a foreign language.
Yeah, very challenging. Well done. You've done great.
I'm still trying. Don't get me wrong. I'm still exhausted most of the days.
It gets easier with the time.
I hope so.
Yeah, I remember feeling also really tired of speaking English when it wasn't a language I was, so yeah, it gets easier, in my opinion. I have one interesting question for both of you. Luisa, let's start with you. So have you ever felt left out of anything professionally as a woman, for being a woman or for being Latina, in your career? And if so, what sort of advice would you give to women who feel they are in that situation?
Well, personally, no. And if anything, the opposite, at least in my environment, there are a very big amount of people that look forward to seeing more women and more minorities programming, and they're ready to help. I've gotten people for my thesis. I remember I got people that I know from nowhere solve problems for me, from Australia, from China. You know, it was like, I don't know you, but thanks. So a lot of that. And if someone's going through that situation, first of all, I'm very sorry. You didn't do anything to deserve it. And know that there's better and start looking for it. And I know that sometimes there are financial constraints. There are a lot of different types of constraints, so nothing's super easy. But start making a plan, you know, say in 100 days, I don't want to be here. Then what do you have to do on day 99, and day 87, and day 50? What do you have to do now? Even if it's a small reminder to Google something tomorrow, get out of there, because there's better. And I've experienced it, and I can only be happy about it and thankful. And please get out of it if any of you has that kind of situation.
That's very good actionable advice. Yeah, great. Leticia, what's your answer?
Oh, big yes. Big yes. I think that there was a combo of like, so I'm very upfront with what I don't know. And being a woman and saying you don't know things, it's not looking, it doesn't look good sometimes. And especially if someone wants to like have a position of power over you. So not necessarily, I don't think it was like just being a woman, but like being a woman and positioning myself in like, I don't know this and I need help or things like that. Definitely. Also like in previous works, I had like sexual harassment, like moral harassment, like things like that were not uncommon. So this is one of the things that it's really hard for transitioning, especially if you don't have a technical degree, because you have to be, well, you don't have to, but I recommend you to be upfront with things that you don't know. And I never lie to anyone saying, I'm the super software engineer. No, no, no. Look, this is what I know. This is what I don't know. And I'm hardworking. I can learn. So the thing that I say is for sure it gets better with time, because the more experience you have, companies want to hire you because you're a woman, because you're a minority, because you're good, because of several reasons, right? So studying, getting better, and moving companies until you find a place that makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel safe is like the most important thing. But for sure it's not like easy going, and sometimes you end up in some bad places and you have to move on. I really love Luisa's actionable, because that's it. If it's not working, if you're suffering in any way, that's not the place for you. Let's do our best to move on and find you a better place, because you can't grow in a place like that, right? Like you can't, if you're in a place that you can say I need help or I don't know this, you're not growing. You can't grow. You're gonna just like have your mental health destroyed. So yeah.
And know that there's places that will actually help you grow, that not every place is like, in
Exactly. Like Luisa's story saying that she didn't suffer and that she got help and everything. I'm not saying that I didn't get help. Like I had a lot of friends and people that were there for me and supported me, and that's how I succeeded. But like seeing someone that joined in a STEM degree and got help and didn't got to an environment like I did, I already think that that's a success, that we're moving towards the right direction. I wasn't that lucky. Hopefully from now on my story was going to be different.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. That's great. So the next topic I want to approach with both of you is like the place of code, of software development today in the world. So just 5 seconds of why I'm really interested in this question. I learned English like 10 years ago when I moved from Colombia to the UK, because for me it was like, I need to learn English if I want to have the career that I want to have, right? And I recently learned code and I did a bootcamp because I felt exactly the same way about software development that I did about English 10 years ago. And I felt, you know what, like I think learning to code, or at least to know some code, something about coding, I feel for me was like the next universal language that I need to learn, like just like I learned English 10 years ago. I wanted you guys to, Luisa, let's start again with you, but to tell me, do you agree? Do you think coding is the next universal language? Yes, or if not, also why? Luisa, yeah, let's start.
Sorry, yeah, I definitely agree with you, but at different levels. Like, if you like English as an universal language, when you say I speak English, as I speak it and I can be in a panel or I can write things, or I don't think people need code to those levels to be necessarily like applied to everything. But a very small understanding would make small tasks on a daily basis very automatable. And also things like, if you think about a lot of different careers, things like Excel are part of it. And if you know, handling data, being able to present a good chart about whatever you're presenting, if you learn a little bit of code with a idea behind it. Oh, I want to learn it to be able to present a better chart. Oh, I want to learn it to be able to process this data that I have about my customers, to know what's better for them. If you learn things with attached to those to purposes, then long term is a very, very, very good skill. And I think that in a matter of 10 years, we may be speaking about like everyone at high school learns a little bit of coding, if it's not already happening in a lot of locations. So yeah. I agree with you. Yeah, definitely.
That was going to be my follow-up to that. So do you think that everyone should, I guess in high school as well, but also people who like adults now, do you think that everyone should learn at least some code?
That's a strong yes.
There's also like it's not for everyone, right? So like, you know, I want to kind of get both arguments in there to see what you guys think.
I think it is for everyone, as long as you have a purpose associated to it. If there's something, you look at it and, you know, you want to make a website with your recipes or with your pictures or whatever. If there's something small, you want to make a small app to learn 5 words, whatever, then it is for you. And then I promise that all the things you're going to learn doing that small project for yourself are going to help you in your career. You're going to get a different sense of logic, a different perspective and different things. So yes, from that point of view, it is for everyone. But feeling obliged to do it just to catch up with the world, I don't think it would be the right approach. But that's a very personal thought, and I don't own a company, so. Yeah.
No, I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I agree. Leticia, what do you think of the importance, the position of coding today?
Yeah, I think that it is important. I think it is something that is going to be more and more useful. However, there are two things that we have to consider. First is coding itself. So not everyone is super excited to get and learn how to code, and that's fine. I learned to code without an objective because I thought that was amazing and I wanted to know more. And if you are if you're curious and if you want to develop this left side of the brain skill, like I super support, and I think you should do it. I agree with Luisa on that point. I think learning how to code changes the way you see some things and changes the way your brain thinks in some ways. So I think it's an ability that if you like and you are interested, go for it. On the other side, I think that at the same time, if you don't think coding is for you, if it's not like, oh, I'm super excited, I think that understanding how the software industry works is important, because more and more we're going to interact with things that are software, right? Like even if you work in an area that you think that's very far away from software, they probably have a website, they probably have a team of developers, they probably have an app. So I think those are two different things, right? Like one, it's learning to code and learning how to do things yourself. And the other thing is understanding how the industry works, but not necessarily learning how to do that. And I think we have a space for both, for people who want to learn just for the sake of it and for being happy and maybe eventually changing careers or not, or just optimizing their own careers with the code they learned. But at the same time, we also need people that know the industry, understand the industry, but because like more and more we're going to interact with developers, with teams of developers, with people that have developed in the past and became managers and stuff like that. And so learning how to interact with this sphere, but not necessarily learning how to code, it's also important. So I think that those are two different areas.
Perfect. That's very helpful to look at it that way. Thank you. Guys, we have some questions coming in, so I just want to go on to the last topic and that we can quickly cover, because I think it's a very important one, and then we can open up for questions as well. So the last question, and I'm going to sort of wrap it up there, but it's essentially, often have you been labeled that because you're a developer, you're super intelligent, or is intelligence really what it takes to be a developer? Luisa, let's start with you. I know you've got some interesting thoughts on this.
Well, actually, for me, every time someone has ever like called me like intelligent or super intelligent, for me, it's almost an insult, because that puts down all the effort I've ever done. I don't think there's such a thing as, as a trait you're intelligent. I think there's a thing like our brains are plastic. There's plasticity. So if you learn something, like I've had so many things, especially in programming, that I've watched one video, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in the 20th video, I've been like, oh, I think I'm starting to understand it. So for me, it's like in my brain, then a shape got formed. My plastic brain changed a little bit. And if you have a lot of shapes that you manage through a lot of work, then maybe when you study the next thing, or when you see the next topic, you get it faster because you already have some small shape that resembles, So for me, it's all about it. The how plastic and the shapes you've formed in your brain with all the things you've learned. So no, I don't like it. And I think that especially for programming, anyone, as long as you put in the hours, can do it. And some people need 5 minutes, some people need 20, but they get there. And yeah, that's a very, very personal and deep thought for me.
Very interesting. Thank you. Leticia, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with Luisa. There's a phrase from Arthur Clarke that says, like, any advanced technology is indistinctive from magic. I think that's the phrase, or something like that. And it's not magic because people do it. And so they try to put the label of intelligent kind of because it's a world that's so far away from them. And the reality is that it's not. You have to study and you have to apply, and like any other thing in life, like we have to think that coding is like learning a new language, like German or Japanese. You have to practice, you have to do it and do it again and be it wrong and learn how to wrong. I think that the label intelligence is kind of like this way of putting the label of black magic, but because someone else is doing it, is not, magic. Because other people are doing, they put the label of intelligent, like, oh, I'm not as intelligent to do that because it's so far away from me. But when you study and apply yourself and do what you need to do, you have to, you eventually get there.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Very interesting, both of you. I'm reading through the questions, and a lot of these are related to some of the topics we've talked about, especially the last one as well. So I'm just gonna start with the Q&A right away. So Andrea is asking, what advice would you give someone who is in their first year as a software engineer on continuing to grow their career? Which I thought could be quite linked to what we've just said as well. So do either of you want to jump in on that?
I can jump in on that. Well, I wrote so this year I celebrated my 4th anniversary of changing careers, and I wrote a blog post that is only with like what I've learned that helped me improve my career. I'm gonna try to remember that there are a lot, but like I think the most important one is learn how to sell yourself, especially if you're a beginner, especially if you're a woman. So we don't learn how to sell ourselves. So when I changed careers, I went to this company and it was not for me. I didn't like it. And with 4 months, I had no experience. I had to get another job. And I had to convince someone that I knew how to program. And that was really hard. And so I had kind of like crash course on how to sell yourself, because that was the only way I could change from the place I was. And so like, if you work on a project, you don't say we did. We don't say that was nothing. Like, learn how to show what you did in a consistent, truthful way, but still selling yourself. So, for example, when I was an oceanographer, I was responsible. I'm gonna say the easy version. So I dealt with a computer. There was a simulator, and I had to like plug the computer and make sure it worked. This is like the normal self version. The version that I would say in an interview was I was a technical responsible for a computer, for a navigation simulation computer, and I had to make sure the software and everything in it was okay and working for the workshop to work properly. Otherwise, it would be my fault. Both statements are true. Both statements say the reality, but one say in a way that's like shows the importance of what I was doing, even though it was just assembling the computer and running the software. But I still had a lot of responsibility on that. And so learn how to sell yourself, sell your work without being dishonest. It was one of the most important skills that I had to learn, and it's going to be important. Nobody will see your work better than you. So if you don't know how to say your work properly, nobody will know the important things you've done.
Yeah, that's very good, very good. Luisa, I've got one which I'd like you to answer. How do you deal with the pressure of feeling like you need to know everything? How do you build confidence?
Well, you don't know everything, and that's okay. And especially like one thing I've noticed a lot among like other colleagues and friends that are also programmers, and not even also programmers, is that we say sorry a lot. Don't be sorry, you know. If you make a mistake, that's okay. Like I compare it with my colleagues. Like, I mean, if they make something bad, they will say sorry. But, you know, if you make a mistake in code, I've noticed that my reaction in colleagues that are also women are like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my God. And usually men are more like, oh, okay, let's fix it, you know? So I think that approach is interesting because we are sometimes very tough on ourselves and we think that we have to know everything and now, and that's not it. And you grow every day, and it's a process, and you don't have to know everything, and no one expects you to know everything. Be honest. Just like Leticia say, sell yourself. You know, when you fix the bug, then put it nicely. You know, a bug is a mistake in the code. So yeah, you don't have to know everything. And also one very important thing is when you have a new topic and you don't know about it, try A, B, and C. And whenever you're in C and you're like, okay, I don't get it, I don't know, then ask for help. But always say, I've already tried this, this, and this, and I've already learned this and this and this because I tried this, this, and this. Can you please help me? And always my experience has been yes. And if I will have it that someone says no, I don't care, keep trying, then I ask someone else. You know, there's a lot of people. So yeah, that'd be what I have to say about that.
Great, thank you. Leticia, I have one which I think you might want to answer. I'm currently enrolled in an all-women's full stack bootcamp. I'm suffering a bit from imposter syndrome and I'm doubting myself and now know that I'll know enough to actually make a career change. Do you have any advice for getting that first job as a developer?
So the first job is the hardest, like that is for sure. I'm not sure if I have good, so now in the COVID world, it's kind of more difficult. My recommendation is know people, do things, get engaged in communities, in meetups. Like we have Latinas in tech, we have groups from specific programming languages, open source. It's really good to get practice and have code out there working. There's a lot of things that you can do, but to be honest, it's going to be hard. It's going to be complicated, but you just have to try your best, do open source work, meet people, do a lot of interviews. Like, even if you don't think you can get it, try it. You'll learn from it. And just hanging there. It's hard. It's not going to be simple, but you can do it.
Yeah, it's hard, but yeah, definitely worth it. Okay, so I'm seeing quite a few questions. If you needed to self-teach, what books would you recommend and what type of paid classes would you recommend? I'm going to say Leticia, but Luisa, if you've got something there as well, would love to hear it.
Well,
sorry.
I can simply say, like, for example, right now I'm teaching myself augmented reality, and basically forget about books, especially for programming. Do small courses. I use Udemy, there's Udacity, there's a lot of them. And for example, one thing is I'm already in the third course, which are all the three of them are beginners, because the first and the second, I didn't really get what was going on. Now with this small things that I've learned in the two beginner courses and the third beginner course, I'm starting to understand things. So just do a lot of beginner courses about anything that you either think like it's related to what you want to learn, or so yeah, just courses online are a good start, or at least for me.
Yeah, so I'm teaching myself Scala, which is another programming language now. So for example, in Scala, books didn't work for me because they assume you know Java, and I didn't. So I tried like 3 or 4 books. I didn't like, it was not for me. And then I got a Udemy course. I think it depends. Like, it depends on the language and depends on what you want to learn. It depends a lot. I really like books. I learned Python from a very old book that probably is very outdated at this point in time. But it depends. It really depends on what the language and everything. One thing that I would say that I use as a method for learning how to do things is writing a blog post about it. So for example, I had to interview someone in my podcast that program in Julia, which is a programming language that I've never ever seen before. So I did like 3 or 4 lines of Julia, kind of like getting an idea of the language, but then I realized that it was missing a lot of things. So I decided to write a blog post for other people about Julia. And then I realized the things that I was missing. And so I wrote a blog post like, what is Julia? And very basic. It doesn't teach you anything. It just gives you an overview of the language, because that was what I needed for that case. So now in Scala, I'm doing the same, because I learned something and then it gets messy. I don't understand. So I try to teach myself. And by teaching myself, I write a blog post, and it's useful for other people that are coming after me, but it's really useful to like put the thoughts in my head. So what I do is I look around, I see everything that I have of options. I try a bunch of things, see what works best for me, and then try to write a blog post explaining that and like gathering concepts from different places and putting for like in my idea, in my concept, in an easier way than when I found before. And so even though it's like, oh, it's hard to recommend 1 book or 2 books, because it depends on your reality and what you know and how far you are in the language. The trick of writing a blog post, for me, it's always helpful, and it was helpful from day one, and it's still helpful now when I'm learning a language that I have no idea how to do it.
Cool.
One small thing about that, I'm actually very bad at writing. So what I usually do, like, for example, for my thesis, I had to learn machine learning, or some of it. And what I did is I found English blog posts and I translated it into Spanish. And by translating, you actually learn a lot, because you have to like really get what you're translating. And that helps so much. So if you're as bad as me with writing, just translate things, translate whatever Leticia writes in English, and then translate it to Spanish or Portuguese or whatever language you love and speak. So that's helped me. So as a final, yeah.
I love that. So
yeah, documentation, like there's a lot of projects that try to document and help. Like, learning English is a privilege, especially when we're talking in Latin America. And so taking yourself to study and then translate documentation of a language, of a framework, of whatever it is that you want to. Yes, that's very good.
Great. So there's a question from Eileen. I've been practicing data structures and algorithms. How do you know when you're ready to begin interviewing? Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to answer that.
Okay, so if I had to depend on data structure and algorithms to pass an interview process, I wouldn't, because I didn't study it. And one of the things that I enjoyed of the process of Stripe was because it was very hands-on and it didn't depend on whiteboarding interviews. So I don't know how to answer that. I'm sorry. Sorry, the only thing that I was gonna say, don't wait till you be ready. Try it. You only know if you're ready if you try it. Sorry, Luisa.
No, see, we say sorry all the time. No, but I said it as well. Never mind. So that's very theoretical, and that sounds like something from university. And there's something very important. I didn't learn programming at university. I learned a lot of theory, and then I bought a lot of courses online as well. And then did, you know, a lot of small projects and a lot of open source and so on. So I now interview sometimes people, and a lot of it is just solve problems. Google solve problems, code problems, and then try to solve those problems. And because they give you live situations or small situations, and you have to write a solution for it. Start with that. There is always very small ones, such as, you know, there are 5 numbers, 5 the maximum of it. It goes from small to big, but then if you keep going up and up, then you improve your interviewing skills. And as, of course, as Leticia say, try it. You'll learn more than ever from that.
Leticia, I think I've got one that you might be interested in. Do you think that being a woman in engineering is easier in Europe or US than in Latin America?
That's hard to answer because I only work in one company here. And so my experience is very biased. And to be honest, I'm in a great place. I love working at Stripe. I love the people there. I feel comfortable. I feel safe. And so like, it's kind of unfair because like there might be other companies that are not great, and I can say. So I have a very biased experience in Europe compared to what I had in Brazil. By my experience, yes, but it might be biased.
Well, there's loads of questions coming in. There we go. So yeah, so there's one question for Leticia as well. So what advice do you have for someone with an interest in data analysis who is self-teaching?
Well, I don't know very much because I don't have like, I'm not working as a data analyst. So again, my experience is very limited. I think that one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of courses and people on data analysis and data science say that, oh, you don't need to learn how to program to be a data scientist or a data analyst, but it's really good. It's really helpful. So even if some of the requirements are not necessarily programming and learning how to program, I would say that that's a really good skill. Another thing is there is a book about ethics in data science and like how your data is always biased and it's always complicated. So that's also a really good, useful thing to learn, but I don't have enough like context on the market.
So we've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to bundle, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to go through all the questions, but I'm going to bundle a couple of questions, which I think would be nice to end on. So one is, Luisa, let's start with you. So one is, how do you stay positive, you know, when you get rejected, like when rejections happen? So whether that's job or, you know, other related. And then there's another question around the feeling of having to be perfect, right? And so like that's a woman in tech and I feel like I have to be perfect. So how do you deal with that? Like when you make a mistake, how do you deal with that feeling of having to be perfect?
Well, look back, I'm like, oh, okay, I've learned this. I'll keep learning. Another obstacle, and learning, one very interesting trait about learning to program is learning to deal with frustration. And I see it in colleagues that have been coding since they're 15 years old. They still get frustrated with their computers and want to throw it out the window. So you don't have to be perfect, and you will never be perfect at programming. So it's hard. It is very hard. And frustration is a big part of this. You try 20,000 different things and none work. And then you start self-doubting. And then you're like, oh, is this really what I should be doing? And then you solve it, and then you're super happy. And then you're like, oh my God, it worked. And then you get a whole new different project, and it's like, oh, how does this work? And then frustration again, and then you learn a lot of different things. So it's a wheel, and a very nice personal challenge is to learn to be nice to yourself, and learn to look back and see what you've accomplished, and try to take that to give you strength to know that you're going to make it. It may take one day more, or whatever, but you're going to make it. So we don't have to be perfect. We will never be. And we're great for what we've already accomplished.
Yeah, I love what you said. And I remember during my boot camp, every week we were seeing a new topic, and every week I felt so stupid because I didn't understand anything. But then I would look back and be like, look at all the weeks I've done and all the things that now I understand so much better than I did. Like, and I was looking at this topic and being like, what is this? Like, what are these teachers talking to me about? But then 2 weeks later, I was like, oh, I get it. So like this topic that I'm really confused about, I'm gonna feel like I get it in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, that was a really interesting parallel that I had during my bootcamp. Leticia, let's end with you about this idea of overcoming rejections and feel that feeling of feeling like you need to be perfect and all of that. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so no's are never easy. I get sad, I get angry, I get frustrated. But again, like it's just someone that didn't see your potential, and that's fine. Like it's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean you're not adequate. It doesn't mean you're not good. It just means that someone didn't see your potential, and that happens, right? Like we're not perfect, and people that are evaluating us are not perfect as well. A phrase that I really like from a very small video is, why do you want to be perfect today if you know you're going to be better tomorrow? And I really like that. It's like, if you're not perfect today because you have room to grow. Otherwise, you like, what we're going to do for the rest of our lives if we're perfect today. So I really like that. That phrase, and I use it. So I have a couple of things that I use. I have a daily journal of things I've done in work. And so by the end of the week, I don't feel frustrated on like, oh, I got stuck 3 days on a bug. Okay, but during the 3 days, I tried this. I talked to this person. I went to this meeting, and I wrote this document. And so I have a journal of things that I've done, even if I'm not pushing code. I'm just trying to figure it out. Then I have a brag document that talks about my work in the past 6 months. So when it gets to the performance cycle, I know exactly what I did, projects that I worked on, how did I dealt with that. And I have a yearly one that is like personal. I don't know, this year I traveled to 10 countries. Well, this year I didn't travel to any country, but I survived mentally on this pandemic. And I do this like journals in different days of time to deal with the fact that I'm not perfect. And sometimes I get frustrated. But by the end of the day, by the end of the week, by the end of the month and year, I'm going somewhere, and then I can look back and I read everything that I wrote. I read everything that I did, and I know, oh yeah, that was really hard, and I did it. And it's like, cool, okay, I can, yeah, maybe I can survive today. Like it happens, frustration happens. It's gonna be hard. You get no's. I get so many no's, and like I applied for so many companies, and I got so many no's. It happens. We just have to learn how to deal with it. And don't wait until you be completely ready, because the guys are not waiting. They are applying, even though if they are not perfect. And so I don't care. Even if I'm not ready, I try. It's not my job to reject me. It's someone else's job. So I try. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I try.
I love that. It's not my job to reject me. I love that. The great sentence to end on. I want to thank you both for such an interesting conversation. Thank you for joining us today. Everyone who joined as well, who listened in, thank you so much, and for all your questions as well. If you're in Europe and you want to be part of the London chapter, get in touch with us. We'd love to have you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for the invite. I am honored to be here.
Yeah, thank you everyone for organizing and inviting us.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.